Time now for Uncancelled, where the world's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. As COVID-19 took hold last year, Australia was being heralded in the mainstream media for its zero COVID strategy that involved shutting an entire country off to the rest of the world, introducing heavy-handed curfews and leaving its people without any form of natural immunity. My guest tonight, James Bolt, a research fellow at the Institute of Public Affairs, was one of the few figures within the country warning that the insidious policy would turn Australia into a dystopian police state and merely delay the inevitable. Sadly, he has been proven right. The highly contagious Delta or Indian variant made its way to Australia's shores anyway, ushering in a never-ending series of snap lockdowns that are costing the country more than £500 million a week in a bid to save a population that is 78% unvaccinated, having been lulled into a false sense of security by the zero COVID pipe dream. As James says, Australia was the envy of the world in 2020. We are now the world's laughing stock. And it is all because of our reckless zero COVID mentality. When elimination is the target, no risk is too small to necessitate draconian restrictions. And James joins me now from Melbourne in the Australian state of Victoria, which is now experiencing its 6th lockdown. And James, look, I salute you because all through last year, I was saying that a zero COVID policy would lead to hell for Australia and for New Zealand. But no one in the Australian mainstream media was saying that because they were all loving the relative freedom they had at the time, even though the borders were locked off and Australians were banned from coming into the country. But sure enough, despite such a draconian border policy, the Delta variant has wreaked havoc.
That's exactly it. So I should point out, when I came on for this interview, I was hoping that behind me was going to be the old Melbourne landscape of just pure life and freedom, and I'd be able to tell you that that is long gone. So that is the terrifying thing, because Delta is an extremely infectious disease, and Australia, through complacency, through a lack of risk management, and through this zero COVID mindset, has completely left itself into an absolute police state.
When did Australians become so cruel, James? Because all of these folk from the country stranded overseas without any route back home seem to just be brushed off as if they don't matter. What about the relatives back in Australia who can't see their family members, their friends, their loved ones, their restrictions? Does anyone care?
People do care. I don't know if it's a matter of cruelty. I think it's just a matter of fear. We've been told for so long how terrifying the rest of the world is, how sick everyone is. We're told to constantly look to Britain as this post-apocalyptic hellscape of what COVID has done, and we don't want to bring that here. So a lot of Australians have said there's only one narrative here. It's either let people come back in or keep yourself safe from COVID, and people have opted to keep themselves safe from COVID. So to give you an idea of how bad these border closures are, so recently our National Cabinet, which is our Prime Minister and all of the state premiers, they got together and they halved the amount of Australians that can come back to this country to 3,000 per week, despite the fact that there are 35,000 people that want to come back. Now, here's something you'll like, Dan. In that 3,000 people that are allowed into hotel quarantine are not just Australians who want to come back and see their family for the first time in 18 months. They're also contestants on Celebrity Big Brother, one of whom is Meghan Markle's half-brother, who is currently being shipped into Australia ahead of maybe some granddad who wants to see his grandkids for the first time in his life, so that he can tell Australian audiences what it was like to grow up with Meghan Markle. And if I can speak for at least myself, hopefully a few other people out there, I don't care.
Well, we were talking about that earlier in the show, actually, because Caitlyn Jenner has flown in, so too Trump's former aide, Omarosa, and as you say, so many Australians remain stranded. But I just wonder, James, is public opinion now turning? Because I follow a lot of Australians and Aussies on social media who, over the past year, have been very behind the strategy and all of a sudden are starting to realise that actually these lockdowns ain't worth it and the strategy has failed. Is the penny starting to drop?
I hope so. There's no like proper data out there that will suggest that, but I'm following the same people you're following. I do see a bit of the shift, even among the pro-lockdown left, that maybe Delta is just too much. Maybe you can't actually get yourself to COVID zero. And I think that is because of this sixth lockdown here in Victoria. And I think it's also because no matter what they do in Sydney, the cases are not coming down because people do end up needing to go to work. I'll tell your audience about what we went through last week, just to get you an idea of how terrifying it is to be in Victoria and why people are starting to suddenly see that maybe zero COVID isn't what it was all cracked up to be. So Wednesday last week in Victoria here, we celebrated Donut Day, which is a day that there is no community transmission in the entire state. Donuts, we all have a donut, we're all happy. That was Wednesday morning. Our Premier tweeted out zero to congratulate himself. Our Chief Health Officer, who's in charge of the COVID response, tweeted out the video of the Australian coach celebrating a gold medal win. I don't know if everyone knows what I'm talking about, but the one we're celebrating. And what ended up happening that afternoon was that there was one case found and everyone stopped celebrating. Everyone got scared because of one case. Now, the very next morning, there was one case. I'm telling you, there was fear. Everyone was texting each other, oh my God, we're going to go back into lockdown. Now, the very next morning, there were 6 cases, right? That jokes are gone. Everyone's terrified. Now, 4 p.m. that day, 36 hours after a donut day, 4 p.m. that day, the state government announced a lockdown that was going to take place at 8 p.m. So every restaurateur who ordered food for that night had to throw it out. And myself and a friend of mine, we went to a pub just because there were 2 hours left of which we could do that after work, and we wanted to make sure we could do it. So we went to a pub for 2 hours. Then at 8 o'clock, that's it, lockdown's in, can you guys go home? And as I'm walking to the train station, there are 4 mounted police officers making sure I don't, go into another business or don't social distance. Like that, 36 hours from zero COVID transmission. That was a scene in Melbourne.
Because of less than 20 COVID cases. And we're talking cases here. We're not talking about deaths. It's absolutely nuts. One thing, James, though, that I do think Australia has also done really badly wrong, it's been a massive own goal for the Prime Minister Scott Morrison, is in the early days seeming to go with the European narrative on the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. So seeming to follow the likes of Merkel in Germany and Macron in France, who for their own ridiculous, petty political reasons connected to Brexit, didn't want the UK to have a successful vaccine to be exported to the rest of the world. And as a result, Australia, even today, but tell me if I'm wrong, but Australia for a long time does not allow anyone under 60 to be jabbed with Oxford AstraZeneca, which means so much of your population remains unvaccinated because it's very difficult to get the Pfizer or the Moderna jabs.
Yeah, it's a very fair, what you put out there is very fair. Now, I don't think it was illegal for people under 60 to get AstraZeneca, but there was the advice from the Australian Technical Advisory Group on immunisation. These are the doctors that decide what vaccines are good. They're the ones who said Pfizer is recommended for under 60s. Sorry, it was under 50s, and then in June they raised it to under 60s. So that also hurt the messaging that Australia's peak doctored body was saying, hey, that vaccine that we've got 3 million vials of, it's scary. So
if you wanted to be jabbed with Oxford AstraZeneca, you wouldn't be allowed because of your age?
You could if you spoke to a GP, but it was the professional advice of the Australian Technical Advisory Group on immunisation that you should not get it if you were under 60.
Okay.
So that's the reason we've got 3 million vials in fridges around Australia that no one wants, because you've got people like the Targi, you've got Queensland's Chief Health Officer going out there and saying that AstraZeneca causes blood clots and she doesn't want 18-year-olds to die of blood clots. So when that's the message of AstraZeneca, of course Australia is only at a 22% vaccination rate because people are going, this might not be safe.
Ludicrous. Massive own goal. And you talk about the police. Look, we've got some footage here of some of the really draconian, over-the-top police methods.
Before.
Yeah, I mean, this is just standard Saturday morning right now in Australia. This is what we're living through.
Just insane. Just absolutely insane. This is in Sydney, and I think this is a police helicopter literally clearing people off beaches. The army is on the streets in Australia, in the Australian city of Sydney now too. Unbelievable stuff. Look, James, I want to bring in my superstar panel. Tonight we've got the journalist and author Rebecca Reed, the columnist and broadcaster Carol Malone, and the political commentator Dominique Samuels. Rebecca Reed, what do you make of all of this?
So I think I'm probably the most pro-lockdowns out of all of us, even though I'm not that pro them. But I was wondering whether you see any good, and I do understand, I think Australia's made a lot of mistakes, but in terms of your very low death figures, do you feel like some stuff has gone right in the Australian handling because so few people died?
Well, obviously, I'm very happy that so few people have died, but whether or not that's the case of Australia's lockdown policy or the fact that we are one giant island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, I think that latter one might be more of a reason that we've been so lucky. I think a lot of islands around the world have had considerably low death rates because they can keep it out, they can make sure the borders are protected, and that there's few other ways of transmission other than people coming in on planes. So I just see lockdowns and the mental health crisis. Lifeline, which is an Australian suicide prevention hotline, they had a record amount of calls on one day in Sydney last week. I think this is getting to the point where lockdowns are really breaking people. They're destroying businesses. They're leading to so many people not going into hospital for cancer screenings and stuff like that. I just really feel that lockdown policies are doing way more harm than they did good through COVID.
And there's no natural immunity still. Dominique Samuels.
Like, actually, oh my God, I can't believe this. I can't believe that people there are genuinely being treated like that. And it makes me emotional because of the amount of people that would be dying from other causes, the amount of people that can't go to hospital, the amount of people that's mental health is suffering because they're trapped inside. And one thing that just really makes me emotional is that there doesn't seem to be really any public outrage about this. And when there is a public outrage, when people are protesting, I saw videos in Australia of people, really out there protesting, it just doesn't get covered fairly or even as widespread. We saw hundreds of thousands of people out in France as well, and it just gets brushed under the carpet, and it makes me so frustrated. I mean, what is the public appetite like over there? Are the polls similar to here? What's going on in terms of public opinion? I'm sorry, I got so emotional.
Well,
I apologise.
Oh, no, please. Trust me, you should see me when Victoria was in its 112-day lockdown last year. That was its common side. So, again, it's hard because since the last kind of polling came out, Victoria's been through 2 lockdowns, and Greater Sydney lockdown just looks completely unfeasible, and they're not going to get back to COVID zero anytime this year. So I think with those truths starting to set in, you are seeing a lot of people that used to be pro-lockdowns start to say, well, maybe Delta is too strong and maybe we need to look at another thing. But that is also one of the terrifying things we've learned through COVID is that a lot of these policies are popular. I mean, at one point, Australia, so in the middle of the Indian Delta spike, I'm sure we all remember that, the Australian government said if you're an Australian coming into Australia from India, you'll be fined and potentially serve 3 years in jail if you even try to get back to your country of birth to escape the Indian variant.
Which I think broke international law, by the way. I really feel it did.
That is as disgusting a government position as been ever put in my lifetime, at least. But the problem is, it was popular. Like, people enjoyed it. People thought, I don't want that Delta variant coming up here. I haven't had vaccination yet. I'm sorry if you're over in India right now, but I don't want to get COVID. That was the public perception, and it was terrifying.
Yeah.
I mean, sorry.
I was going to say, can I ask you a question, James? You talked about fear before. In this country, we were very worried about what was happening to society in general. Do you think the psyche of the Australian people has been changed permanently because of the way you've been terrified by your government and put into lockdown?
That's what I was going to ask.
That's $1 million question. Psychologists are going to be debating for years whether or not this has been new or maybe this has been something in the Australian character for years and it just took COVID to bring it to the surface. But I mean, Britain's always looked at Australia as the descendants of convicts. I'm starting to think we're the descendants of the wardens. I think we really like the rules. I think we really like to be kept safe. And the government, Big Brother's our friend, I guess.
It's such a shame because for me, Australians are daredevils. You want to get out into the world and experience life, and it makes me so sad that you've put you've put the borders up and you've said no more. We're happy to be a country cut off from the rest of the world. I hope it changes. While I obviously don't want to see a wave of deaths like so many other countries have experienced, unfortunately, despite those draconian border controls, the most draconian in the world, the Delta Indian variant still got into the country. And that's what even our scientists on SAGE here say now. Border closures don't make a difference in terms of bringing the variants in. It only delays it for a short period of time. So Australia has to get real because we're open now and hopefully lockdowns are a thing of the past. And it feels like Australia is right back where the UK was in March 2020. Zero COVID policies don't work. James Bolt, such a pleasure. Thank you for getting up early for us and do keep us posted over the coming weeks. Coming up, we'll reveal today's greatest Britain and Union jackass. But next in the Media Buzz, should curry be cancelled?